Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the English Learning Podcast, the place where you improve your English with natural conversations. I'm Jason, and as always, I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Julia. Hey, Julia!
Hey, Jason. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited about today's topic because it's something that almost every English learner struggles with, translating in their head before speaking.
Yes, if you've ever found yourself thinking in your native language, translating each word, and then trying to speak in English, you're not alone. This is a super common problem for English learners, and today we're going to help you break this habit and start thinking directly in English.
That's right. And Jason, I remember when I first started learning English, I would always translate from my native language before speaking. It made me slow, nervous, and sometimes my sentences didn't even make sense.
Exactly. And the problem is, the more we translate, the harder it becomes to speak naturally. But don't worry. By the end of this episode, you'll have practical techniques to stop translating and start speaking smoothly.
Yes, and we'll also talk about how the brain learns a new language and what you can do every day to start thinking in English like a native speaker.
So, if you're ready to improve your English fluency and confidence, stay with us till the end. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode. All right, now let's talk about the big problem, translating in your head before speaking. If you're always thinking in your native language first and then translating to English, it can slow you down and make speaking feel frustrating.
Yes, and it's something so many learners struggle with. Imagine this. You're in a conversation and someone asks you a simple question in English like, "What do you do for work?" Instead of answering right away, your brain goes, "Okay, let me translate this question into my native language. Think of a response, translate it back into English, and then speak." By the time you figure out what to say, the conversation has already moved on.
Exactly. And this delay makes you feel nervous, self-conscious, and sometimes even afraid to speak at all. That's why a lot of learners hesitate and lose confidence.
And the truth is, translating doesn't always work because different languages have different sentence structures, grammar rules, and ways of expressing ideas. If you try to translate word for word, your sentence might not make sense in English.
Right. Let's take a quick example. In English, we say, "I'm 25 years old." But if you translate directly from some languages, you might end up saying, "I have 25 years," which sounds incorrect in English.
That's such a good example. Another one is with greetings. In English, we say, "How are you?" But in other languages, the direct translation might be something like, "How is your condition today?" which sounds unnatural in English.
That's why translating in your head doesn't just make you slower. It can also lead to awkward or incorrect sentences.
And another big problem? It makes English feel like a second step instead of your natural way of communicating. If you always think in your native language first, your brain never gets used to forming sentences in English automatically.
Exactly. And here's the thing. When native English speakers talk, they don't translate anything. They just think in English and speak naturally. That's what we want you to do, too.
Yes, so if you feel stuck translating all the time, don't worry. You can train your brain to think in English, and that's exactly what we'll teach you in the next section.
So now that we understand why translating in your head slows you down, let's talk about how the brain actually learns a new language. This will help you understand why thinking in English is so important.
Yes, and the first thing to know is that our brain learns languages differently from how we learn other subjects. When we learn history or science, we memorize facts and information. But when we learn a language, we need to develop a skill, just like learning to play a musical instrument or a sport.
Exactly. And when you first start learning English, your brain is like a child learning to walk. At first, it feels awkward and difficult, but with practice, it becomes automatic.
That's a great way to put it. And here's something interesting. Your brain actually has two ways of learning a language: passive learning and active learning.
Right. Passive learning is when you listen to English conversations, watch English movies, or read in English. Even if you're not speaking, your brain is still absorbing the language.
And then there's active learning, which is when you actually use the language, speaking, writing, and thinking in English.
And here's the key. If you only learn English passively, like by watching videos or listening to podcasts, but you never practice thinking or speaking in English, your brain won't develop the ability to form sentences quickly.
Yes, it's like watching someone play the guitar all day but never picking up the guitar yourself. You won't become a guitar player just by watching. You have to practice.
Exactly. And the more you actively use English without translating, the faster your brain will get used to thinking in English. That's because your brain forms neural connections every time you practice.
And the best part? Your brain is designed to learn languages naturally. That's how babies learn, by listening, imitating, and repeating, not by translating.
That's right. So instead of thinking, how do I translate this sentence? Try thinking, how would an English speaker say this? That shift in mindset will help you become fluent much faster.
And don't worry if it feels difficult at first. It takes time, but the more you practice, the easier it gets. And in the next section, we're going to give you practical steps to stop translating and start thinking in English.
All right. Now it's time for the most important part. How can you stop translating in your head and start thinking directly in English? We've got some simple, powerful steps to help you make this shift.
Yes, and remember, this is a process. It won't happen overnight, but if you practice these steps consistently, you'll notice a big difference in how naturally you speak English.
Okay, let's get into it. Step 1. Start with simple words and phrases.
Yes, if you're always translating full sentences in your head, that can be overwhelming. Instead, train your brain by thinking of single words in English first. For example, if you see a tree, don't think of the word in your native language. Just think tree in English.
That's a great tip. And once you're comfortable with words, move to short phrases. Like, when you wake up, instead of thinking, I need to brush my teeth in your language, think it in English.
Yes, and that leads us to step 2, talk to yourself in English.
Exactly. This might sound funny, but it's a great way to train your brain. Throughout your day, describe what you're doing in English. I'm making coffee. I need to find my keys. It's a sunny day. The more you do this, the more natural it becomes.
Yes, and don't worry about making mistakes. This is just for you. The goal is to get your brain used to thinking in English instead of translating.
That's so important. Now, step 3, use images instead of words from your native language.
Oh, I love this one. Instead of translating words in your head, try connecting them directly to images or ideas. For example, when you hear the word apple, don't think of the translation. Just imagine a red, juicy apple in your mind.
Yes, this is how native speakers think. They don't translate. They just associate words with images and meanings.
Okay, let's move to step 4. Listen and repeat.
This is a great technique. Listen to English podcasts, TV shows, or conversations, and repeat sentences out loud. You don't have to repeat everything. Just focus on key phrases.
Right. For example, if you hear someone say, "That's a great idea," pause and repeat it exactly the same way. This helps your brain get used to natural English sentence patterns.
That's a great tip. And finally, step 5, practice speaking with others.
Yes, even if you don't have an English-speaking partner, you can join online communities, language exchange groups, or even practice with AI chat tools. The key is to use English as much as possible.
Absolutely. And remember, fluency is not about perfection. It's about confidence. The more you practice thinking in English, the easier and faster it will become.
So don't be afraid, start small, be consistent, and soon you'll notice that you don't need to translate anymore. You'll just speak naturally.
All right, now that we've covered steps to stop translating, let's talk about something really important: the role of listening and speaking practice.
Yes, a lot of learners focus only on reading and writing, but if you want to think in English and speak fluently, listening and speaking practice are absolutely necessary.
That's right. So, let's start with listening practice. Listening is one of the best ways to train your brain to think in English naturally.
Exactly. When you listen to English regularly, your brain starts recognizing sentence structures, word patterns, and pronunciation. This helps you understand English without needing to translate.
And here's a great tip: listen actively, not passively. Don't just play English in the background. Really focus on it.
Yes. One way to do this is by using the pause and repeat technique. Listen to a sentence, pause, and repeat it out loud. This helps your brain connect the sounds to meaning instantly.
I love that. And another tip: shadowing. This means listening to a conversation and speaking along with it at the same time, like an echo. This improves pronunciation, rhythm, and fluency.
Great tip. Now, let's talk about speaking practice. A lot of learners think, I'll start speaking when I know more English, but that's the wrong approach.
Exactly. You don't wait until you're ready. You start speaking now and improve as you go. Speaking is a skill, and the more you practice, the better you get.
That's right, and here's a simple way to practice. Speak out loud every day. Even if you're alone, describe what you're doing in English.
Yes, and try having mini conversations with yourself. Ask a question in English, then answer it in English, like, "What did I do today?" "Oh, I went to the store and bought some fruit."
I love that. And don't forget to find speaking partners. Join an online language exchange, talk to friends, or even use AI chat tools to practice conversations.
Great point. And one last tip: don't be afraid of making mistakes. Mistakes are part of the learning process, and every mistake helps you improve.
Yes, so listen daily, speak daily, and soon you'll think in English naturally.
All right, now let's talk about the ultimate goal: thinking in English naturally. You've learned why translating in your head is a problem, how the brain learns a language, and steps to stop translating. But how do you train your brain to think directly in English?
Great question. Thinking in English is a habit, and just like any habit, it takes time and practice. But don't worry, we have some powerful techniques to help you.
Yes, let's start with Technique 1. Use English for everyday thoughts. Instead of thinking in your native language, try forming simple thoughts in English first.
Exactly. For example, if you're planning your day, think in English. Okay, first I'll make breakfast, then I'll go to work, and later I'll meet my friend. This helps your brain get comfortable with English sentence structures.
That's a great tip. Now, Technique 2. Label everything around you in English. Look at objects in your home, your workplace, or outside, and name them in English without translating.
Yes, if you see a chair, just think chair. Don't think of the translation. If you do this consistently, English words will come to your mind naturally.
Absolutely. Now, Here's technique 3. Have an inner monologue in English. Talk to yourself in your head in English throughout the day.
Oh, I love this one. Imagine you're narrating your own life, like a movie. I'm walking to the bus stop. It's a cold morning. I need to buy coffee later. This forces your brain to process English directly.
That's such a fun way to practice. And here's another great method. Technique 4. Think in pictures, not words.
Oh, yes. This means instead of translating words, you connect them directly to images. When you hear dog, don't think of the word in your language. Just imagine a dog in your mind.
Right. This is how native speakers think. They don't translate. They just associate words with ideas and feelings.
Now, let's talk about technique 5, speak first, fix later. Don't worry about grammar too much at the beginning. Just try to express your thoughts in English.
Exactly. A lot of learners hesitate because they're afraid of mistakes. But the more you try to think in English, the better you'll get. Fluency is about confidence, not perfection.
That's so true. And if you follow these techniques daily, you'll soon notice that you no longer need to translate. You'll just think in English naturally.
Now, let's talk about something that stops many learners from speaking English. Fear. A lot of people know English but feel nervous or afraid to speak. Julia, why do you think this happens?
Great question, Jason. Fear of speaking comes from different reasons. Some people are afraid of making mistakes, some worry about their accent, and others feel shy because they think their English is not good enough.
Exactly. But here's the truth. Making mistakes is normal. Even native speakers make mistakes. The key is to see mistakes as part of learning, not as failures.
Yes, and actually, making mistakes helps you learn faster because you can correct them and improve. So, instead of being afraid, think of every conversation as practice.
That's a great mindset. But what if someone feels really nervous when they try to speak? What can they do?
Good question. Here's tip 1, start small. You don't have to speak in long, complicated sentences. Begin with short sentences and simple words.
That's a great tip. Even saying things like, I like coffee or the weather is nice today helps build confidence. And here's tip practice with yourself first.
Oh, I love this one. You can talk to yourself in the mirror or record your voice. This helps you get used to hearing yourself speak in English without pressure.
Yes, and if you record yourself, you can listen to it later and see where you can improve. Now, let's talk about tip number 3. Speak with friendly people.
That's important. Find people who support you, language exchange partners, online communities, or even friends who want to practice too. The more you speak, the more comfortable you'll feel.
Absolutely. And here's a fun one. Tip 4, pretend to be confident, even if you're not.
Oh yes, this is called fake it till you make it. If you speak with energy and a smile, you'll start feeling more confident naturally.
That's a great trick. And one final tip. Tip 5, focus on communication, not perfection. The goal is to express yourself, not to be 100% correct all the time.
Yes, people will understand you even if you make small mistakes. What's important is getting your message across. So don't let fear stop you. Just start speaking.
Wow, Julia! We covered so many important points today about stopping translation and thinking in English. Let's do a quick summary for our listeners.
Great idea. First, we talked about why translating in your head is a problem. It slows you down and makes conversations harder.
Then, we explained how the brain learns a new language and why direct thinking in English is the key to fluency.
Right. After that, we gave practical steps to stop translating, like using English for daily thoughts, labeling objects, and creating an inner monologue.
We also talked about the importance of listening and speaking practice, because the more you hear and use English, the easier it becomes to think in English.
Yes, and we gave powerful techniques to train your brain to think naturally in English, like thinking in pictures, using simple sentences, and speaking first without worrying about mistakes.
And let's not forget one of the biggest challenges, overcoming the fear of speaking. We shared tips like starting small, practicing with yourself, finding supportive people, and focusing on communication, not perfection.
Exactly. And remember, fluency is not about knowing every word. It's about confidence and practice. The more you practice these techniques, the easier it will be to think and speak in English.
So, to everyone listening, don't wait for perfect English. Start speaking, start thinking in English, and enjoy the learning process.
That's right. And if you found this episode helpful, subscribe to our podcast and share it with your friends who want to improve their English.
Yes, and let us know in the comments. What's your biggest challenge in thinking in English? We'd love to help.
Thanks for listening, and see you next time.